Reservoir Dogs Script and Screenplay Analysis by Sean McHugh, 2020-26, Part 7 of 12. 31. Can bad language be justified, and why do Westerners use sexuality for it? Western culture mistakenly prioritizes the intellect's reasoning and calculation over the intuition's immediacy and sensation, and so with sexuality as intuitive experience central to the human condition, Westerners refer to the contradiction in expressing annoyance and negativity. Sex is a process of visceral Dionysian mentality encroaching on, and then overwhelming conceptual Apollonian mentality, where the virginal mind relinquishes its sky castle conceits as not justified from the consciousness it has. For less conscious persons, in lacking depth of direct intuitive evaluation, overthinking still takes place, and thus all the characters, as with most Westerners, remain like a virgin, as Brown intimates. Groundless theorizing issues from the assumption of the mind's relation with reality being subject to object, and which is converted to grounds for truth out of the subject-to-subject relation of sexual experience. Sex is normal, harmless, and important, and referencing it contemptuously shows confusion or cognitive dissonance in the less conscious mind, while obscenities and expletives are only substitutes for better or concise words, and undermine both what the speaker says and themselves personally. The man's actions in sex are not getting the better of or doing someone over or degrading them, and instead the woman's claim on his attention means by necessity he is had as much as has, is possessed as much as possesses, and gives as much as takes. Men and women, or any partners, approach sex entirely equally if from two aesthetic sides, where subject and object, and hence the culture's excess rationality and intellectual theorizing over dualities, as far as the individual's consciousness can manage, are dissolved for unitary direct perception. With sex aligned with mental maturity and the union of intellect under intuition, its alienation in virginal Western culture means worsened errors of judgment out of excess rationalizing for the less conscious. Sex as fundamental and everyone's origin isn't wrong, and instead the culture's values, norms, and consequent thought processes are wrong. The film's bad language reflecting its characters' problems as issuing from their inability to see with any depth what's going on in their situation, then isn't merely part of or reinforcing the wider culture, but an artistic critique of it. The frequent Jesus and Christ further reference the West's repression of critical thought beyond normative paradigms, as benighted virginal thought reflected in its religion, with divinity opposed to sexuality, and its central figure a virgin, who is so confused he wants to suffer and die, and his mother a virginity goddess. Moreover, while the Virgin Mary's iconography is stupidly and offensively treading on the phallic snake, Eddie's angry joking to White about a snake charmer to help Orange is Eddie's subliminal mind making the sexual connection between them, and particularly White's phallus charming Orange. Then, the Virgin Mary, with her snake, connects with Brown's Like a Virgin story, with its phallus, and with Madonna, the song singer, being a name for the Virgin. Accordingly, the biblical Garden of Eden's account of a supposed wrongful snake is the phallus tempting a couple to have sex, and then see with maturity and clarity, independent of the controlling social system and its disapproving Christianity, although in White's and Orange's case, their vision remains affected by the repressive environment. The White and Orange couple reflects the Garden of Eden, where whiteness as the notion of virginity as purity when prior to the orange, as the name of a fruit as the forbidden fruit, or sex, and with homosexuality particularly forbidden, while the color orange is also named after the fruit and not vice versa. Orange as a fruit recalls the breakfast diner wall painting of sacks of oranges, and Orange's apartment has a box of breakfast cereal in white, with orange lettering saying Fruit Brute, as Orange being tough for his undercover role. There's further a Christian cross on his wall, with arms in orange, plus blue, pink, and green, for him trying to fit in with others and with money. Sex shouldn't be a matter of temptation against a high-principled culture that uses disapproval for control, but the snake is also a reminder of the animal world being full of deception to avoid, and with no determinate ethical rules. Furthermore, Nash compares with Christ being tortured to death as Christianity's central image to look up to subvert common sense in saying that wrong is right and one's suffering is to be welcomed, all to the existing elite's benefit. Then Blonde, however, compares with the parallel subtle understanding that for spectators destroying a rival, such suffering is good and to be relished under Dionysian fascination for horror as beyond Apollonian intellectual culture. 32. What are all the characters' mistakes in using profane sexual language? The characters outwardly talk their silly sexualized profanity in record cinematic levels, instead of being inwardly at one with sex. There are sexual dynamics and rivalry compromising their robbery and safety, particularly because under the defect of homosexuality and cultural expectations against it, White isn't able to talk about his special relationship, while his mistaken opposition to doubting Orange also distracts the others from it. The hidden sexuality helps the hidden traitor. White deceiving the others over his favorable relationship with Orange also distracts him from seeing that Orange is very unfavorably and shockingly deceiving him back. Dissimulation is normal in human interaction, but it's in excess across the characters, and often in real life, where they fail to judge and avoid the subtle initial situations leading to it. The team never notices that sexuality, as culturally repressed to dictate their lewd language for expressing the negativity going on, is also affecting them directly as the main cause of that negativity. Instead of perceiving and addressing the sexuality in their midst, it causes much of their thinking to spiral into neuroses and madness as they progressively kill each other. The suppressed background contradictions of intuition and intellect means they say fucking this or that profusely in encountering problems. But if instead they could think straight, they'd see that there is exactly such fucking going on that is causing those problems, and subliminally specifically suggesting that language to them. Orange fucks White, both literally as lover and figuratively as undercover policeman, where the bad language from the 8 men outside the relationship expresses subliminal awareness of the literal and figurative aspects, while White's bad language expresses only the figurative, and Orange's is always self-conscious as knowing about both. For instance, at the end of the White and Pink main warehouse conversation with White kicking Pink on the floor, Pink says rhetorically, "You want to fuck with me?" But when White does, "Want to fuck Orange, and I'll show you who you're fucking with," when Pink's critical discussions are indeed beginning to show who the person White is fucking with really is. White also says, "Fuck you and fuck Joe," in reference to Joe's homophobia that he has to be careful of, and moreover, White's and Pink's extended exchanges back and forth reference the colors of the ethnic white phallus head in action, as well as alienation from their sexual selves. The anonymity Joe issues for the robbers suits not only Orange's undercover role and gay relationship, but homosexual partners also sometimes sharing personal details with each other to a minimum out of social condemnation risks. Here, White might have told Orange his first name before Orange was shot, rather than White having become more emotionally vulnerable to tell him then. But Orange shows he's thinking of his partner only in terms of his alias, in his developing interest in white-colored clothes and apartment decoration, rather than White's real name, Larry. Then Orange plus White are being further deceptive, where the rest of the team would disapprove of any private relationship, from its favoritism undermining the whole and bringing risks on the job. Other occasions when ass, as referencing the homosexual relationship, surfaces in speech, include White saying that waitresses bust their ass, taking Blonde's ass out myself, a distant girl's ass, and the store is insured up the ass alongside its manager wearing ladies' underwear, and Orange saying in reference to himself and his dubious relationship in his drug story, practicing both, that gotta be a pain in the ass, and in its imagined sheriff's conversation, I scream at him, asshole. Then there's Blonde saying Skignetti is an asshole and asshead, his silly-ass curfew, and particularly both him and Eddie saying your head up your ass in reference to the phallus head, and Eddie saying twice to Blonde about the ass in gay sex, and Orange's manager saying about a criminal record, a sheet on this Mr. White's ass, and about Long Beach Mike, I'll take care of his ass. The use of shit throughout can further reference gay sex. 33. What does White fail to take from the conversation with others in the car? Pink and Eddie here provide anecdotes as ongoing virginal-type subliminal expressions of what's happening in the situation from the two boyfriends and undercover policemen with them in the car. The anecdotes are largely addressed to White, with his suppressed internal uncertainties, and accordingly the scene begins with the opening words, "I can't stop this feeling deep inside," of the Blue Swede version of the song Hooked on a Feeling, as played in the policeman's car, and heard disappearing as White touches his nose, as he did in his office meeting with Joe. The title also parallels the words, "I've got the feeling that something ain't right," heard in Stuck in the Middle with You, as applied to White's criminal counterpart Blonde and the torture scene. It's further a love song for White's relationship in parallel with Fool for Love, heard in Orange's apartment where he was picked up from immediately before. Moreover, White in the car wears dark sunglasses as him seeing least clearly, while the other three don't. Moreover, the Blue Swede album, named after the song, has a cover featuring 6 men standing on white snow and dressed for the cold, for White's team environment of coldness towards his sexuality, and against a white and blue sky for his ultimate meaninglessness, with an outside blonde border for the other gay outsider, Blonde. This compares with the likewise eponymous Stealers Wheel album cover, with its 5 men plus orange color that Blonde and Nash listen to. White should be thinking critically about Orange, while Blonde should be thinking critically about Nash. Orange, meanwhile, in the car with his extra policeman deception, is then more directly perturbed by the conversation and its implications, with close-ups of his face. Pink remarks that white women tolerate more mistreatment from their white partners than black women from their black partners, where in the white couple of White and Orange, with Orange the man and White the woman as being Mr. White, and despite White is senior and Orange junior, White is unwittingly tolerating far more than he should from Orange. Pink has only just met them, but likewise senses unwittingly both that they're boyfriends and that Orange is a policeman, while his observation of people out in the world also exemplifies his critical thinking beyond the others. Immediately behind and to the sides of Pink and Orange in the back seats, with White in the front, are lights with white lenses and faint orange bulbs lit inside all, as Pink's talk puts in the back of White's mind a faint light on or idea about Orange, as his subconscious worries about him. Pink's light is first positioned in the center of a shot, with him then in the main and repeating shot positioned exactly at the back of White's head, as the back of his mind, and before Pink's head. The orange bulbs contrast with lights with white bulbs in Joe's office and Orange's apartment. However, as Pink begins speaking, his light is off. Then, in the next shot, it's on, as White listens and responds, and then in the final shots is off again, as White tries subconsciously to argue with Pink and distract himself and engage with Eddie's story and Orange's talk about actresses. Orange's light, however, stays on in all 3 shots of his, as he instead thinks more understandingly, continuously, and anxiously about how talk from Pink, Eddie, and himself relate to his situation. White immediately disagrees in self-defense, although only in saying that black men are as abusive as White, as Orange listens in pleasant and incredulous surprise, rather than saying that white women don't tolerate more mistreatment. White senses indeed he's being mistreated, so this is his best, if pathetic, counterargument. Pink says, "I know what I'm talking about," as referencing his knowledge of black culture having worked with blacks, and his overall speech style, yet fails to think about who Joe's Miss Black might be following the planning meeting that he's driving to. He speaks, however, of blacks who are showing their ass in public in reference to Orange, as Mr. Black and as gay, but it all stays subliminal, and hence, by contrast, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Eddie then, in support of Pink and against White, gives a vulgar comic story of a black couple where the woman, in not taking mistreatment, glues her abusive partner's phallus to his stomach. Here, White and Orange are both devious Mr. Blacks, with their covert relationship, where White, being subliminally concerned about the continuing parallel between women and him, again interjects to laugh self-consciously and at length at the idea that he provides that she was from a poorer and rougher area, as discrediting and explaining her actions. Eddie sweeps this aside, however, saying she was from a particularly rich black area, as comparing with a particularly rich white area, and not even a regular rich white area as Pink suggests it to be, all as White continues laughing. Eddie, in subliminal awareness of White as a woman, in terms of gay boyfriend, says the woman was a cocktail waitress and a man-eater upper, or very attractive, reflecting White being a cocktail mixture between the sexes, and waiting on Orange's cock, or phallus, and being attractive in terms of having won Orange over, despite Orange being a policeman in opposition to White. Then Eddie again alongside Pink, in subliminal awareness of Orange, not just as boyfriend but undercover, says the woman looked like the actress for the character Christy Love in an eponymous undercover detective television series. He describes her as the black female cop, in worsening reference to Orange, as the group's deceitful Mr. Black, and as gay boyfriend, this time comparable with a woman, and as policeman. Eddie can't recall the series title, Get Christy Love, all as he can't foreground the necessity of getting or eliminating undercover Orange. He's furthermore wearing black here. He's an actor for his undercover role, in parallel with the television actress and Eddie's woman, looking like the cop Love compares with Orange in his awkwardness, often looking like a cop, while he's also in love with White. White again laughs heartily at only Eddie and Pink, saying the cop character was known for saying, "You're under arrest, sugar," all as Orange is in line to say exactly the same to his kind boyfriend, but criminal White. When Eddie and Pink confuse the actress in the series with the actress Pam Grier in one of the films influencing it, Coffee of 1973, Orange attempts to undermine Eddie's story about the woman resembling the series actress by giving the widespread view of that actress and series being inferior. However, in trying to name the series actress himself, he crazily provides Anne Francis, an actress in the related woman private detective series Honey West, but who was white, and in the previous decade, all in subliminal reference to himself as being white, plus with his relationship with White, and hence getting far more confused than Eddie. Orange being so wrong also indicates that he doesn't know the Get Christy Love series, and his own evaluation is fake, rather than just not knowing who its actress or Francis is, where his negativity is based on other reasons. Also, him showing interest in at least the film and Francis's series, alongside his interest in Beretta given just before Eddie collects him, indicates him taking inspiration from fictional undercover agents for his own role, but Eddie just provides an impressed response, rather than any pausing to think about this. Orange wears white under his black jacket for his hidden Mr. White relationship, under his primary hidden Mr. Black policeman, while White wears a similar white top as further subliminally prompting Pink's remarks about white and black women, and Eddie's following story about black women. Honey West was filmed in black and white, and hence reflects all this, and Orange being unable to escape the multiple metaphors, while other black and white references are Eddie's office talk of black prisoners and white seamen, the reconnaissance photos, and the robbers' suits, plus the film's 3 gay men name screens. With Eddie's black woman's story and Orange's black and white policewomen, White is prompted but fails to think like a black woman and see his situation in black and white. Indeed, with Orange wearing black and white a white top, plus Pink and Eddie black tops. Then the others not meeting the black person Eddie knows parallels them not meeting the black person Orange knows, his manager. The car's exterior and interior entirely gray coloring, including seating, doors, ceiling, and steering wheel, compares with the reconnaissance photos, and White as Orange lying between white and black or binary sexuality. Meanwhile, near the start of Eddie's story, when speaking of the woman as desirable, but most men only thinking about her, outside past him are 3 closed orange doors in a blonde building for the 3 gay men, where Orange closes the door on blonde for White. Then as Eddie reaches the end of his story and the car stops, outside past Pink is an orange and white road sign with black lettering. Moreover, 10 fictional detectives, or their actors, for the 10 characters, are mentioned by 7 characters, but none can properly detect their way out of their own situations. In film order, Brown mentions Charles Bronson, Blonde and likely Nash mention Lee Marvin, Eddie and Pink, Christy Love, and then White and Orange, as most affected by the detective issue, mention 3 and 4 each. White, Charlie Chan, Honey West, and Charles Bronson again, and Orange, the Fantastic Four, Beretta, the Get Christy Love prior film, and Anne Francis. Various levels of subliminal awareness and leakage into the conscious mind for subtle outward expression of the hidden relationship and the infiltration are shown by all four present: Pink with his initial remarks, White with his reactions, Eddie with his story, and Orange with his corrections. Like a virgin, however, none think the situation through properly, their Western predisposition for reasoning about given factors dominating their minds. White here represents Westerners as the white ethnic group, with their inability to reconcile sexuality and rational society, while Orange's manager, as the only main character alive at the end, is of a different ethnicity. Anne Francis also has a major role in the important psychological film Forbidden Planet of 1956, as a virgin who gains maturity of mind through sexuality in the context of a civilization as a metaphor for the West, whose end results of basing the mind on intellectual principle instead of its real base in the intuition was its destruction. In Eddie's story, White and Orange paralleled the black couple, with a continuation of White as the woman and Orange the man from Pink's anecdote, and where Eddie describes the woman being married to a real piece of dog shit, I mean a real fucking animal and a bag of shit, as his subsurface notion of Orange being White's horrendously betraying boyfriend fucking him. Orange, in seeing the uncomfortable reference to himself more directly than White, asks Eddie if he means that the man beat her up, for Orange to reason the lines into his partner isn't as bad. But Eddie says, I don't know what he did. He just did things, in getting slightly annoyed. Eddie doesn't know, at least outwardly, that Orange is a policeman, nor hence what he's doing to White, while Orange's unsuccessful efforts at countering Eddie parallel White's countering both Pink's and Eddie's stories. However, Orange asking Eddie for details on whether the man beat the woman is also Orange getting back at him after he asked him during his prior drug story about having weed on him to sell in a train station as being risky with police around, and which Orange indeed goes on to discuss, and hence Eddie slightly spoiling his story in front of the others. Orange here is wondering if Eddie's story isn't entirely truthful, all as his wasn't, and hence he's likewise applying pressure, although Eddie seems to just take the question to be irrelevant and tells him to shut up. Saying that he doesn't know what the man did also exemplifies him not knowing what is going on, as comparing with the blonde office conversation, Vicki Lawrence song, phone call with Dov, and Joe in the final scene. In the story, the woman waits for the man to get drunk before she uses wacko glue or superglue on his phallus and stomach, such that he can keep his phallus to himself instead of her, and it's the wrong way for urination, such that he may have to do handstands for it before paramedics arrive to cut it loose. Again, White tries to be agreeable, and once more laughs excessively at the end when the woman gets her revenge, while in fact he's being weak with his man. In parallel with the man's intoxication, White's killing of the two policemen is followed by Orange's drowsiness and disorientation out of shock. Then Orange getting shot involves his sticky blood gluing his phallus to him before the police arrive in an attempt to cut him loose from White's relationship with him. Paramedics typically work in pairs, and a pair of police arrive at the warehouse as indicated by two voices shouting at White. However, Eddie here is surmising the future, and hence the story can also be understood where Orange is instead the woman applying the glue in terms of White's adherence to him, and hence turning White's life upside down in relation to his phallus, and where he's freed from Orange by being prompted to shoot him when the police arrive. White tries laughing when Eddie seemingly mentions that the story was told to him by a wetback, or illegal Mexican immigrant with a hidden identity, all as Orange is lying to his boyfriend, as well as the team, about who he is. In connection, White at the end of his stationary car conversation with Orange says they'll get the Mexican food, tacos, as showing his liking of Mexican culture, in parallel with liking Orange. The complaining about yet then praising of African culture in the car journey conversation, with White speaking of niggers and Pink of damn niggers, yet all four variously admiring of a black waitress and two black actresses, is likewise given in Mexicans being both negative and positive. Further, White and Pink in the warehouse show regret for Blonde killing a black girl in the store, before Pink complains at White and Blonde for arguing like niggers, while Joe and Eddie in the blonde office conversation show casual racism towards blacks as jungle bunnies and as particularly gay and contemptible, despite Blonde also being gay. All this reflects subliminal awareness of the presence of a Mr. Black on or influencing the team, as comprising either undercover Orange or his directing and likewise compromised black manager. Then, although Eddie is providing a gross and slapstick story about a phallus, he contradicts himself when presently, in the narrative, showing dismay at and aversion towards Brown's gross and slapstick story about a phallus. The stories indicate a lost state of mind connected with sexuality, where the speaker and others listening think they're above or different to the discussion, but are gravely similar. Both stories are told with misplaced aplomb, where those around try carefully to interrupt and redirect, but with the speaker reasserting themselves. Although, whereas for Brown, all just want to move on, for Eddie, White and Pink laugh at the end, as again contradicting themselves. The stories are the film's two most sophisticated, yet given by the two least capable characters shortly before the heist, when they need to stay focused rather than joke, and indeed with Eddie's car being trailed by another car, which then neither he nor anyone else notices. Moreover, Joe, in his car, will be taking Blonde, Brown, and Blue to the planning meeting at the same time, and afterwards Eddie and Joe take them to the breakfast diner, where the cars are seen, and then away to carry out the heist. The numerous cars and car journeys involved in the film are the typically overthinking, groundless Western mind, assuming it's always going somewhere purposefully, but in fact going nowhere meaningful, except to its demise. All 10 characters tell a story of their own in expression of subliminal awareness that fails to become foregrounded. Joe's 5 guys sitting in a bullpen, Eddie's in one of Daddy's clubs, White's when you're dealing with a store like this, Orange's I got my gun drawn via the sheriff's, Pink's buying weed, Blonde's I got something outside, Brown's like a virgin, Blue's I tuned out, Nash's I got a little kid at home, and the manager's use the commode story. Most of these involve stories within stories, all as the film is about subliminal stories within the main story, as applying equally to the unwitting characters and audience. 34. What mistake do White and Orange make in their carjacking? Brown crashes the getaway car after not seeing properly from being shot, and they need to find a new one, where White decisively shoots 2 police, but then they only walk off and allow a woman driver to shoot Orange, even with White having run to her side with his gun out and her window open for him to threaten or shoot her to stop her. Orange shows his criminal naivete in not seeing that she's reached for a gun from her glove box and is pointing it at him, and instead he just reaches for the passenger door. He needs to first coordinate with White to get her to drop the gun while keeping back, then tell her to get out before he gets in, and with the passenger window already open for him to speak, and only then should he open the door to get in. His police training for the undercover role is entirely deficient, with more culpability on his manager. In Orange's drugs sub-story musings, as what might happen to him during his undercover role, the sheriff repeatedly tells a driver reaching for his glove box to put his hands on the dash, but Orange's thinking remains disconnected. He doesn't make sense of it properly, and fails tell the woman to do anything. Just when Orange thought he was clear of the robbery and out of danger, he lets his guard down, where he's shaken by White's killings and confused about what he might have done, before dire results instead emerge from an unexpected direction, where again he needed to think, a woman with a baby to defend. On arriving at the warehouse, he says, "She had a baby, and there's a baby's crib in the car rear seats," while crib is also to secretly copy or plagiarize, all as Orange is weakly copying being a criminal. In complete contrast, Pink, for his carjacking runs at top speed, then, instead of opening the door immediately, breaks the driver window and violently drags his woman driver out through it, before likewise shooting at police. White and Pink make a comparison of their escapes when talking via a flashback for Pink, and which then adds to White's consternation over what happened. Pink's flashback compares with Orange's drug story flashback, but which is fake and connects with his mistakes in his own carjacking. Orange is both shot and driven on a road parallel with parallel railway tracks, and which become multiple tracks, as his fake story, state of mind, the wider film, and the whole Western culture the film both depicts and is part of, are in a parallel reality, or unreality, as Apollonian culture, prioritizing intellectual theorizing over Dionysian, more direct intuitive perception. Orange is further going the wrong way on a one-way track, while the white and orange romantic pair go off to infinity in their approaching deaths. In the breakfast diner, there are also two wall pictures of railway tracks, likewise next to a road, in reference to the train diner car origins of American bistro diners, while the Little Green Bag song following that scene mentions looking back on the track, and with the bag taken as a marijuana bag, referencing Orange looking back on his marijuana bag drug story after being shot. Their stolen woman's car is orange, including for Orange's connected drug story imaginings, with a white top and white seating, where Orange's red blood creates orange stains. Its open door edge also shows white and orange, plus blue stickers, while the dash area is all black for Orange as Mr. Black. The events take place next to an orange curb, with a white painted area as Orange being curbed by his circumstances and white. It's a two-door car for their partnership, but alongside Joe's, Blonde's, and White's two-door cars, and in contrast to Eddie's, Pink's, and Brown's four-door cars. These seven are associated with a car of their own, while Nash shares Blonde's, Blue shares Joe's, and Orange's manager has no car, as the only character not taken for a ride to his death. 35. What's Orange's mistake with his drug-stealing story memorization? Orange memorizes the phony story outline and adds his own further details as his manager instructs for giving to Joe, Eddie, and White in the bar. He describes carrying marijuana for a sale, then encountering 4 sheriffs in washroom with their sniffer dog barking and yelping at him, looking at him with ears and tail up and shuffling around, in perfectly acted responses, but when Orange stays cool, the sheriffs ignore him. The story is to indicate to the robbers Orange's capacity to keep cool under pressure, but the manager also selects it from being set in a train station as issuing from him waiting for Orange in a diner, with its elongated shape here in railcar style. It further connects with the breakfast diner's wall paintings of trains, despite this room being square, while Orange's carjacked journey is alongside rail tracks. The manager says, "It's the details that sell your story," as comparing with the film story's wealth of details, revealing subliminal and critical content that make it compelling, whether these are understood or not. However, Orange forgets parts of the story practiced in his apartment and at the graffiti building, both in the script given him and seemingly from his own detailing, showing that the manager's preparation strategy doesn't work well. Orange's own details, however, then extend into an unrelated private sub-story musing across the second half of the scene that presumably isn't given in the bar, where a sheriff explains his misunderstanding of what a citizen driver was doing before Orange washes and dries hands as all the sheriffs stare at him. The manager tells Orange to learn the story by repeating his notes endlessly, while his sub-story is a subliminal indication of a similar reality he's soon to encounter, and moreover, which is given as he urinates and thereby relaxes, for these truthful if uncoordinated thoughts to drift by. All as variously out of the sub-story. Following the heist, he gets shot in surprise by a driver. Then at the warehouse, police withhold fire before he gets shot in the face. It's also a reminder that civilians may be unsure of what to do and unpredictable in tense situations involving guns, alongside policeman Orange here and White, plus White in his final moments with Orange. The story and sub-story compare with Orange's wider undercover story to the robbers and this drug sub-story, with all stories being wrong-headed and leading to trouble. Repeating but not learning also recalls Eddie hearing his "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia" song, while the manager giving Orange a story to keep saying it to internalize for himself reflects the society's elite via mass media, giving the masses stories that are repeated to internalize for themselves without critical analysis. Orange's drug story comprises sequential scenes of the evening diner with his manager telling him to use it, the roof where he gets it on sheets, his apartment where he practices, the graffiti building where he demonstrates for the manager, the bar where he performs it, the dramatization, including the sub-story, and briefly back to the original diner meeting where they talk about Joe. Also, the bar and dramatization, prior to the sheriff's story, alternate several times with a return to the bar for a comment from Joe at the end before on to the diner. The return to the diner also suggests all these events are passing through Orange's mind in advance because they're subliminally understood to be problematic, yet he's failing to avert them. At the end of the graffiti scene, Orange also shows exasperation at the further levels of deceit the story is bringing to what ideally should be a genuine relationship with White, but he goes along with it. Indeed, the return to the diner that frames the sequence is further Orange being framed by the manager with the whole drug story process, unnecessary and creating rather than reducing suspicion in Joe and White. It later emerges also that the manager is a paid, if guarded, informant for Joe in vast web of mutual deceit, where he has only limited interest in Orange's well-being. Moreover, the film has only one other brief recapitulation, return to a previous scene, with Orange bleeding in the car 2 or 3 scenes from the start and 2 or 3 from the end. This is the whole film framed in parallel with the drug story, where Orange's wider thinking is fake, not just for his drug story, and then where the sheriff staring at him forebodingly is his subconscious sense of where his situation is going. In the car flashback, Orange's and White's opening words are repeated, but are acted again with slight differences, plus different blood marks behind him, and with the camera only on Orange's face. This compares with double imagery seen in Pink's parallel running from the store and his police shootings. There is further only one other pair of alternating scenes. There are 5 shots of the bar containing 4 of the dramatization, while likewise there are 5 shots of Eddie's phone call to Dove containing 4 of Nash's beating, after the announcing shot of Eddie's car and orange balloon. The washroom dramatization encapsulates the weak thought and mistakes in the film, while Nash's beating metaphorically encapsulates the results of these for the audience and wider society, as downgraded treatment from the elite in real life. Orange's literal and attempted figurative hand-washing compares with White's self-conscious hand-washing in the warehouse, while Orange's noisy hot air and white hand dryer compares with memorized words he's not thinking about properly, plus the rest of his hot air talk leading to death across the film. The dryer draws the sheriff's foreboding staring over his grave mistakes, but he surmises in his imaginings that he's just being disruptive to them. His hands are in slow motion, with only the dryer sound in trying fecklessly to clean himself from his wider actions and issues, while he ignores the washroom's mirrors that might give him back to himself more honestly, similar to his apartment mirror and White's mirror. The only other slow motion is Joe's insufficient consideration of Orange, as immediately after the dryer shot, plus the team of 8 men with the actor's credits, walking after breakfast again, where they should be thinking more carefully. Moreover, the sub-story imaginings are particularly unrealistic in that sheriffs as higher ranking likely wouldn't be found together, nor doing the basic rail station duty that Orange seemingly describes. In the main story given to him, they would be regular police, only finishing at the wash basins before leaving normally, but under his immaturity and out of his musings of subliminal content relevant to him, they continue talking. His manager suggests extra details, but here are expanding into fantasy. The sheriff's story for his 3 colleagues is important to Orange, so he raises their rank and adds the detail of them being a bunch of cops hanging out in the men's room talking in order for him to listen to them. But when adults never do this as being an unclean place, and only children might as not understanding. In his mind, one of them further sits on the side of a sink as unclean and wet, while the washroom's row of 8 wash basins is school-like and is one for each of the schoolboy-like robbery team. In the graffiti building rehearsal, he mentions watching the Lost Boys film of 1987 as likewise for a younger audience, and betraying his inability to mature and learn, featuring 2 boys that never grow up, as himself and White, along with the robbery team, all to be lost, while aligning with his interest in superheroes. He says, "I'm going to the boys' room rather than men's room," as the term the manager uses, while boys connects with the evening diner announcing an event, accompanying Orange's entry, being a great day for little boys. There's also a man waiting outside the washroom holding a newspaper, as by contrast, the need to think clearly in black and white. The manager fails to consider that orange is indicating immaturity, and further details he adds to make the story his own may reflect this and compromise the story for his audience, such that he's unsuited to such undercover work. However, perhaps only an immature personality would agree to such dangerous, morally dubious, and confused work, where the guy has to have rocks in his head, as one of the car policemen watching him says. The background problems of Judgment with the operations role, its recruitment, and its unraveling are related, while the manager has limited commitment out of his corruption from Joe. Orange shows more childishness at the breakfast diner, when in trying to distract Brown's subtle depiction of him in white, but also to fit into the conversation, he asks how the True Blue song goes, when an adult mind wouldn't immediately sing the tune out. Here, in at least claiming not to remember it, he's also trying to distance himself from the notion of being truly blue, as the Los Angeles police uniform color, as also subsequently mentioned by Pink and Blonde. However, the more mature Joe and Pink at different points also complain at others in terms of being in a schoolyard and playground. Joe in the planning meeting indeed has positioned the seating in 2 rows of 4 and 3, like a classroom instead of a semicircle, in subliminally recognizing them as immature and controllable, while encountering Orange's more overt immaturity likely contributed to his hiring him as fitting in with the group. Moreover, Orange speaking of having to go to the washroom parallels Pink the same in the warehouse, as both schoolboy-like but wherein similarly relaxing and seeing more clearly, he returns to White saying, "I'm outta here, man," before succumbing again to overthinking and staying. To be continued. Reservoir Dogs. Any questions?